What is going on, everyone? How are you doing? I hope you're doing good, because it is good to feel good. And this is a very special video because today it is officially 13 years to the day since I started this YouTube channel, and that feels weird now because now, as an official thing, this YouTube channel is now in its adolescence, it's in its teenage years, and that sounds crazy in its own right, but as is tradition with this YouTube channel, and every time I do an anniversary video, here's a little snippet back from my first video. Yeah, that's all you're getting. It's blink and you miss it. But what I wanted to do with this video is talk about something very special, like a little topic that I always talk about on my anniversary videos, and that is from an event I've attended previously, and it's also got me excited, you know, in the lead up to the same event that I'm attending, I was about to say in a few months' time. Literally, when this is going out, it'll be in a few weeks' time. So that is, of course, WrestleMania. So for those of you who may or may not know, this year I'm attending WrestleMania 40 in Philadelphia, but it's not the first time that I've attended WrestleMania. In fact, I attended WrestleMania 35 just 5 years ago in East Rutherford, New Jersey, and yeah, I wanted to do a video like just talking back about my experience, you know, from what I got to, like the matches that were on the card, and also just kind of what I was doing around WrestleMania itself. So yeah, let's dive back into it and go back to where I was 5 years ago. For those of you who may or may not know, I've talked about it in length on this YouTube channel before. I am very much a lifelong wrestling fan, and one thing I always wanted to do one day was attend WrestleMania. Like, in fact, I think for any fan, going to WrestleMania is, like, you know, on the bucket list. It's basically, I guess you could say, the mecca of wrestling, and, you know, it's where the big things always happen on WrestleMania, and, like, you know, big matches, big, you know, spectacles, just all great around experience, and I definitely would recommend it for any wrestling fan who hasn't been before. Don't get me wrong, I've talked about it before, how as much as I like doing things with, like, friends and meeting people and, you know, sharing experiences, I am one who likes to do things on my own accord, i.e. going to New York for WrestleMania. So I got up to a fair bit when I was in New York. So apart from WrestleMania itself, I also attended WrestleMania Access in Brooklyn. In Brooklyn, I also attended NXT TakeOver New York at the Barclays Center. I attended the Ring of Honor New Japan Supercard at Madison Square Garden. And then after WrestleMania, I attended both Raw and Smackdown after WrestleMania, as is the tradition, at the Barclays Center. I crammed so much into that short space of time, but it was so much fun. And when I go to Philadelphia, I've got all sorts booked for that trip as well. I might talk about it later in the video, but I'm definitely looking forward to WrestleMania again this year. But anyway, going back 5 years ago, it was April 7th of 2019, I'm making my way to WrestleMania itself, go to Penn Station, and then get the train over to New Jersey, and then a shuttle bus over to MetLife Stadium, and then, you know, we're all queuing up to go into the venue itself. And I just remember one of the first things I kind of hit me was, like, when I was walking into the stadium towards my seat, it all kind of just flooded into me. In fact, here's my little reaction to how I was when I first entered the venue. Oh wow. Oh wow. Alright, I'm marking out right now. This is excuse my language, this is f***ing cool. That dream of, like, being in the flesh at WrestleMania, dream come true. Oh, it's just so nice that moment was. Obviously, we're just about to get into the main portion of the show, but of course, before we do so, we've got the KickOff show. So, running down the matches that happened on the KickOff show, you had Buddy Murphy versus Tony Nese for the Cruiserweight Championship. Tony Nese won. You had the WrestleMania Women's Battle Royal, which was won by Carmella. You had the Raw Tag Team Championship defended by The Revival versus Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder. The latter ended up picking up the victory. And it was also a note that it was the end of Kurt Hawkins' losing streak, which was in place since he returned to WWE back in 2016. So, a very weird note to just have, like, you know, them come together. They're basically, you know, at the time, a jobber tag team, and it's like, oh yeah, we're going to win the tag team championship, and that's what happened. And then the final match on the pre-show was the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, a match that has since been relegated to SmackDown before WrestleMania, but I'd like to see it back on the show. We need everyone in that Battle Royal. But this year, like, I remember distinctly, in this Battle Royal in particular, I distinctly remember there being the Saturday Night Live hosts of Colin Yost and Michael Che, and they had that little interaction with Braun Strowman, and Braun Strowman ultimately ended up winning the match, so that was all quite nice. So now we move on to the main show, which starts off with the singing of America the Beautiful, which is per tradition, sung this year by gospel singer Yolanda Adams. Then you have your big massive video package hyping up the event, and then of course the opening pyro, which is always a highlight of WrestleMania in most years. Then you have WrestleMania host Alexa Bliss come out, and she says she can create a moment by snapping her fingers, WrestleMania moment that is, and she does it. She doesn't snap everyone out of existence like Thanos did, but no, who else comes out but Hulk Hogan, and he's doing his all the shtick where he's like, let me tell you something, brother. And then he's like, it's great to be here in the Silverdome, just like what he did at WrestleMania 30. And then he's like, no, it is great to be here in the MetLife Center. And it's just like, what's funny is I've watched it back since recently, and it's like, you can see the camera shot when he's saying that, and you can literally see the words in the background, MetLife Stadium. How do you get that wrong? But anyway, then of course he does this whole, you know, what you gonna do, brother, and all that, and, you know, rumble out on you. Then Alexa Bliss and Hulk Hogan are doing the whole posing and stuff. But then who should come out but Paul Heyman, and he comes out, you know, with Real American just like playing in the background. It's quite funny, like out of context, but you know, he's coming out for a simple reason, and that is he's pissed off that Brock Lesnar is not main eventing that night's show. And so what do they do? Well, Lesnar's gotta go on first. That's what happened. So then we've got our first match on the main show, which is Brock Lesnar versus Seth Rollins for the Universal Championship. Before the match even starts, Lesnar is just like, you know, going to town on Rollins, you know, attacks him before he even enters the ring, gloves up the F5 to the background, you know, throwing him back and forth, you know, and then eventually he gets into the ring, you know, he's in an ample position to start the match, goes for another F5, and then, you know, Rollins manages to get off his shoulders, pushes him into the referee, and then nice little woof in the knackers to Brock Lesnar, and then 3 consecutive curb stomps, and then Seth Rollins is your new Universal Champion. So I always feel like, you know, you've got to start off WrestleMania on a real positive note, so having Rollins win the Universal Championship was a very good move. The next match we have on the card is Randy Orton versus AJ Styles, and one thing I liked about the build to this match was there was all like, you know, he can hit it out of nowhere, the RKO that is for Orton, and it's like, you know, AJ Styles was trying to figure out ways how to avoid it, and that's very much how this match played out. There was all sorts of spots in this match where like Orton, like, you know, had Styles in like ample positions to hit an RKO, but AJ Styles, being very smart, was able to scout him and counter him like wherever he could. Like, I remember there was a spot where he was going to go for the phenomenal forearm. Randy's about to hit the RKO, but then he's like, nope, I'm not springboarding over you, I'm going to do a 450. And then there was all that back and forth, there was a nice little, you know, roll-up attempt. Orton then hits the RKO, and that's not the finish. But then one cool spot I remember is AJ Styles did 2 phenomenal forearms, one to the outside, which is rarely ever seen by Styles, and then to finish off the match it was a case of where Styles was going to go for the phenomenal forearm again. This time Randy Orton like catches him, like, you know, just before he's about to hit it, and it looks like he's about to hit a super RKO, but no, he managed to scout him again and like stop him in his tracks, hits the phenomenal forearm and wins the match. I will admit this was a good match, but it was overshadowed by the fact that, you know, I don't know what was happening behind the scenes on the show, but basically the lights were just being fumbled about with, and so there were portions of the match where there were blinding lights being shone around like the stadium itself and sections of the stadium, and it's like it more or less overshadowed the match, you know, with chants of like, turn the lights off, oh please turn the lights off. And I distinctly remember fans cheering when, like, you know, they turned them off, and then it was like they were being ribbed, then they turned them back on. I'm sure that was a mistake, unintentionally, but I find it no coincidence that the following year's WrestleMania, for its theme song, had Blinding Lights by The Weeknd, and it was like, was that kind of just like a rib or something? I know, obviously, ironically, there were no fans in attendance for the following year's WrestleMania because of COVID. Before we start the next match, there was a little bit where Lacey Evans decided to come out, and it's very much during this time, Lacey Evans, before she, like, you know, started doing matches on the main roster, she was doing very much the Abe Simpson, you know, seeing Bart at the doorway, dropping off his hat, and then he's like, oh no, pick up my hat, bye bye. it's very much that. So then the next match we have is the 4-way tag team match for the Smackdown Tag Team Championship. The Usos defending against Sheamus and Cesaro, Shinsuke Nakamura and Rusev, and Ricochet and Aleister Black. Now, the latter team had a very busy week that week because they had been taking part in tag team championship matches across all 3 bands, Raw, SmackDown and NXT. They were unsuccessful against the Revival on Raw just that week, and then on NXT TakeOver New York they lost to the Viking Raiders, or when they were the War Raiders rather. So there's a lot of like crazy offense going around this match. So one thing I distinctly remember is at one point Sheamus was delivering the Beast of Bálor on the outside of the ring, while Cesaro was in the ring delivering his massive giant swing, and it just kept going and going and going. There was a really good Tower of Doom spot where, like, I think Ricochet was on top, and like, you know, he was like, "Ooh, we're tumbling down," and then Ricochet manages to roll back onto his feet after the momentum of that, and then he goes for a 630 senton onto Sheamus, unsuccessful with a pin, and then there's a really lovely sequence where everyone's just going about delivering the signature moves. So Jey Uso goes for an Uso splash, he's caught by an uppercut from Cesaro, then Jimmy Uso hits a super kick on Cesaro, and then the sequence goes on where Rusev then hits Jimmy with a Machka kick, then Aleister Black with a Black Mass, and then Kinshasa from Shinsuke Nakamura, and then a single Nico breaker from Ricochet, and then to end off the sequence you've got Sheamus delivering a bro kick to Ricochet, and he does a shooting star press in the process. Lovely stuff. But then both Usos hit their super kicks on Sheamus, go for a double Uso splash on Sheamus, and they retain the tag titles. The next match we got after this was The Miz versus Shane McMahon, the best wrestler in the world at this point, and one thing I did love is how he just let, like in his character, he just let the ego go completely to his head, and you know, he wants perfection. And I specifically remember on the night where like he's announced when he's on his way to the ring, and he's like, "That's not good enough, do it again." And then it's like, he does it, and then it's like, again, that's not good enough, do it again. And he's like, and then Greg Hamilton, the announcer at the time, he does it like so hard and like, you know, keeps it going, the momentum. The best in the world, Shane McMahon. Oh, it was lovely stuff. And then of course, one of the things I loved about the story going into this match is that The Miz was fighting for the honour of his dad George Mizanin, and I loved all like the baked potato jokes that were thrown at George for this. But this match was all sorts of fun. It was a Falls Count Anywhere match as well, I should add, but it was all sorts. So Shane early on gets a cheap shot on George, then of course Miz is trying to fight back, then obviously Miz gets knocked down by Shane, he's going to go for his suicide elbow drop, like the leap of faith I think it's called, and then who should run out but George Mizanin himself to be like, "No, don't hurt my son." And I just remember being in the crowd that night and I'm like, I'm popping hard for this.
Yes, George! Go on, George! Yes, George!
Wrestling can be silly when it needs to be, so George just coming in for the save is just incredible. And then he gets into the ring and he's like, he's throwing up his fists, and it's like, you can tell he's never been in a fight like this before. And then I love it how Shane just gets George into position for a fight, and then he just does his like lays a load of fists. Oh, it's fun stuff that was. So then eventually The Miz and Shane then spoil to the crowd. As they're going through the crowd, they then go towards the international row of announcers, and I can't remember whose announce table they go through, but it's great stuff, but nonetheless. So then eventually they're then working towards like the tower where the hard camera is, and I know quite literally working towards the hard camera. Miz delivers a skull crush finale to a 2 count, and then of course they're climbing up the tower again, and then they get to the top of the tower and like Shane's just basically begging, "Oh, don't hurt me, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." And then Miz is like, "Nah, we're going down together." So then The Miz delivers a massive superplex off the tower where the hard camera is, and in the process Shane manages to get his arm over The Miz to pin him, and because it's Falls Count Anywhere, he picks up the victory, the silly goose. Madness that match was. Next up, we had another 4-way tag team match, this time for the WWE Women's Tag Team Championship, pitting Bayley and Sasha Banks, the champions, versus Nia Jax and Tamina, versus Billie Kay and Peyton Royce, the Iconics, versus Natalya and WWE Hall of Famer Beth Phoenix. Now, a little note for the latter team that I really liked was that, you know, Bret Hart appeared on stage to wish them well in the match, and I thought it was actually quite heartwarming, no pun intended, to see Bret there, especially after what happened to him the night before at the Hall of Fame. Such a shame when that happens, but you know, good to see him in good spirits for that moment. This match was very kind of back and forth. I know there was a lot of double team moves happening. I remember distinctly at one point where Nia Jax and Tamina deliver simultaneous Samoan drops to both members of the Iconics, and then for the finish, Bayley's in a position for a glam slam courtesy of Beth Phoenix. And then, using her initiative, Billie Kay tags herself in, and it's in their corner as well. So Beth Phoenix then hits the glam slam, she goes for the pin, but then of course she's not the legal woman. Then Billie Kay swoops in, and then obviously Peyton gets Phoenix out of the way. And then 1, 2, 3, the Iconics are the Women's Tag Team Champions. And I thought it was actually quite heartwarming because there were quite a few Australians in my section, if I remember correctly, who were very chuffed about the Iconics winning. The next match we had on the card was Daniel Bryan versus Kofi Kingston for the WWE Championship. I've talked in length about this match before and just like how heartwarming it was for the actual result, but kind of going back over it, I think this is like the 3rd year in a row on my anniversary videos that I've talked about it, but nonetheless, here we are talking about it abridged again. So, of course, you know, Kofi Kingston's coming to the match with all sorts of momentum. It's Kofi Mania basically, and you know, this is his one chance to, you know, become WWE champion. And then Daniel Bryan, in stark contrast to the previous year's WrestleMania, is like, you know, this despised heel who is basically wanting to save the planet. He is the planet's champion, and I love the irony that, you know, he's the bad guy, but his points are justified. So weird WWE logic with that, but nonetheless, this was a great match, you know, a lot of great technical masterpieces here and there, and like, you know, Daniel Bryan doing everything to, like, you know, make sure Kofi Mania doesn't happen. I even remember there was one point during the match where he's doing the yes chant, like, you know, he killed the yes movement and he's ironically trying to revive it, and it's just like, when he's gesturing yes, we're all going no. That was a good little moment, that was. But then there was another good moment where, obviously, New Day are brawling with Eric Rowan on the outside. Kofi delivers a Trouble in Paradise. The other New Day members hit the Midnight Hour on Rowan. And then as Bryan's going for a suicide dive, you know, Kofi manages to dock him and get him there. Kofi then goes for a Trouble in Paradise, but then is met by a running knee from Daniel Bryan, and it's just like, oh, that is a near fall. I was very confident that could have been the end of the match, but you know, a near fall of like one of the best near falls I've ever seen live. So then of course Bryan's then got the label lock locked in again, and then of course Kofi then fights his way out of it, you know, stomps a mud hole, and then goes for the Trouble in Paradise. 1, 2, 3, Kofi Kingston is champion. And I've talked about this before, but it's one of the most heartwarming moments I've ever experienced live for a wrestling event. It got me in tears, and you know what? Here's a clip of that again.
This is really sweet. New Day shit. Oh, yeah! I'm so happy, but Kurt been brilliant.
Next up, we had a match for the United States Championship, which was Samoa Joe versus Rey Mysterio, and this was a very quick affair, much like this segment will be. So Rey Mysterio hits a Hurricane Rana to Samoa Joe, picks up a 619, and then, you know, goes for a little his little kind of wheelbarrow bulldog, but to no avail, and then Joe immediately locks in the Coquina clutch, and that's it. That's all she wrote. I tell you what's also interesting about this is that Rey Mysterio has the distinction of being in the shortest timed matches for both the United States Championship and the Intercontinental Championship, both clocking in under a minute. So there's a little fun fact. The next match we had on the card was Roman Reigns versus Drew McIntyre, and it was also notable for this being Roman's first singles match back after coming back from leukemia, and it was also a few weeks prior he had the Shield's final match together at Fastlane, before then the Shield's final chapter happened a few weeks later. Let's just forget about that for a second, but this match was pretty decent. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't anything special, but you know, it was fair enough to say that Roman Reigns, after coming back from leukemia, hadn't missed a beat, and also was notable for being Roman's first singles match not in the main event of WrestleMania. So there's a little fun fact for you. So it was a very, you know, very straightforward match, you know, everything you'd expect to see from a Roman Reigns match, you know. I always remember the ending sequence. You've got Drew McIntyre hitting a Glasgow kiss, a headbutt, and then, you know, Reigns with a Superman punch, and then finishes off with a nice spear. Then after this we have a nice little interlude for the show, which was basically Elias doing a live musical performance, and I always distinctly remember it's him there in person in the ring on his guitar, and then that's juxtaposed with, on the screen you've got a pre-recorded video of Elias playing the piano and playing the drums. So he does his little good stuff, and then you know he's saying all his catchphrases. Who wants to walk with Elias? And like, you know, and even I remember there was like light up in the crowd where it was like, it literally had Walk with Elias, which I thought was pretty cool. But then as he's about to start playing his big musical number, then on the screen you've got like, you know, a video package paying homage to both the New York Yankees and in particular Babe Ruth. And then who should appear but the very heart and soul of New York, that's a joke by the way, John Cena. And it's not just any John Cena, Doctor of Thugonomics John Cena. So I remember just distinctly, like, you know, I've memorized the words at that point to basic Thugonomics, so I was singing my heart out to the lyrics. I tell you what, it's really cool to see John Cena these days, like in his latter years of wrestling. I mean, sure, he may make very rare appearances, but nonetheless it is still always such a joy to see him, which is ironic because you can't see him. So then, of course, he's throwing out all sorts of insults at Elias, making hints towards, like, you know, his movies being crap. He calls Elias a piece of shih tzu, and then there's a nice little photoshopped image of Elias on, like, a dog. And then, you know, as to end it off, you know, he says, you know, I've overstayed my welcome. I will now leave you, but so there will be no AA. But you're about to get the FU, which is, of course, before WWE went PG, that was the move what is for is now the attitude adjustment, so it was nice to see that. And just all, like, the little quirks of Doctor of Thugonomics John Cena, that was good to see. Next up on the card, we have Triple H versus Batista in a no-holds-barred match in which Triple H's in-ring career is on the line, and it's a coincidence because 6 years prior at WrestleMania, also taking place in MetLife Stadium, in fact 6 years to the day, Triple H was also taking part in a no-holds-barred match with his in-ring career on the line against Brock Lesnar, so, you know, nice bit of deja vu there. So I distinctly remember Batista's coming out, I'm singing my heart out to his theme song, his little snippet.
Yeah! I walk for miles inside this danger. A place where no one follows me, I walk alone.
So then, of course, Triple H then has, you know, one of his midlife crisis entrances. Like, I mean, let's just be fair. At WrestleMania, most times out of 10, you're going to have, like, a big, extravagant entrance. This year, Triple H's entrance was all Mad Max themed, and he came on, like, very, very much as a dystopian, steampunk style vehicle, and, you know, it comes out, you know, it's showing on the video package, it's, like, juxtaposed, and then the actual vehicle comes out to the ramp, and then he comes off, and it's just like, seeing that in person, it's really cool. But then, now that I mention cool, I remember watching it back, Michael Collin commentary is like, how cool was that? And it just completely ruins the mood. But then, of course, I mean, I'll be completely honest, as much as I love Triple H and Batista, this match went on for about just around 25 minutes, and yes, at this point, Batista was in his 50s and Triple H was nigh on 50. But it did not need to be 25 minutes long. It just went a bit longer than it should have done. You know, of course, there was a lot of, like, you know, weapon spots. I remember distinctly there being Triple H, you know, using pliers to pull out Batista's nose ring, you know, using chains and whatnot, and I think, yeah, all sorts of crazy stuff. But I remember the end of the match, you know, Ric Flair just shows up out of the blue and, you know, coaches us all off guard. Triple H then, just out of the blue, on, like, you know, using the momentum of the steps, he then delivers basically a Superman punch style sledgehammer shot to the face of Batista, hits a pedigree, 1, 2, 3, and then Triple H's in-ring career is intact. Although, what's sadly ironic is that this would actually be the last WrestleMania match that Triple H would ever have, and of course he would have, I think, 2 matches after that. He would have the match with Randy Orton at Super Showdown in Saudi Arabia, and then would it really class it as a match? I know there was like an unsanctioned match or something that he had during the Thunderdome era. I don't think officially that was a match, but then of course that was of course the last WrestleMania match that Triple H had before his in-ring retirement back in 2022. So at least he went out on I wouldn't say necessarily a high note, but you know, good to see Triple H nonetheless. Next up we have Kurt Angle's retirement match, and who should he be facing but Baron Corbin. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing against Baron Corbin, but his booking during this time, this was where Baron Corbin's character was just completely unbearable, and you know, it just like he basically had go away heat. You know, we were just sick of seeing him. I think after everything where he was like, you know, the Constable of Raw and the de facto, you know, Raw general manager for a period, it just got to a point where I'm just like, I can't bear this anymore. In fact, I remember the McMahon family coming out on Raw in December of 2018 saying, like, you know, we're gonna give you what you want, you are the authority, you are in charge. And it's like, nothing really changed by April of 2019 if you think about it. And yeah, Baron Corbin's in a match with Kurt Angle. Of course, it's always great to see Kurt Angle. He's one of my favourite wrestlers. You know, I met him in previous years at an independent show. But Baron Corbin as Kurt Angle's final opponent just didn't seem right with me. There could have been anyone he could have picked, but Baron Corbin's apparently the best choice. I don't know. By this point, Kurt Angle probably, he doesn't have like the in-ring ability that he had, like, you know, in his earlier years, you know, when he was like on the ball. So his offense was very slow in places, you know, delivering angle slams, you know, the ankle lock, and even at one point he goes, you know, takes the straps down of his singlet, he goes for a moonsault to no avail, and then of course Baron Corbin picks up the victory at the end of days, and it was just depressing. Like, you know, Kurt Angle's a legend, don't get me wrong, but this is his final match and this is how he goes out. It's very much, you know, the opposite of what Ric Flair versus Shawn Michaels was in terms of a retirement match, or even to a similar extent you've got Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels. It was very much pales in comparison to those two matches how bad this was. But nonetheless, you know, I guess Kurt Angle tried to put a positive spin on it, and you know, get everyone still going out happy, and you know, getting him to chant "You suck" as he, you know, left the ring. It was depressing nonetheless. Next matchup we have Bobby Lashley versus Finn Bálor, the Demon Finn Bálor, for the Intercontinental Championship, and it was actually quite cool to finally see Demon Finn Bálor in the flesh, and you know, the very extravagant entrance and everyone doing the war, and and also this was during the era where Bobby Lashley was, like, you know, backed up by Leo Rush as his hype man, and especially I always distinctly remember this was the era where, for whatever reason, WWE had Bobby Lashley like flexing his bum and whatnot. I don't know, very weird times, and especially 2017 to 2019 WWE was a very weird time, let's just be completely honest. So of course, the whole crux of this match is that, you know, Finn Bálor hasn't been able to beat Bobby Lashley clean, so you know, he brings out his inner demons, hey, and you know, he does all the, you know, crazy spots in this match. There's even one spot where Lashley delivers a spear to Bálor to the outside of the ring, but then of course, you know, Bálor manages to get the better of Lashley by delivering a big massive powerbomb. So for someone Finn Bálor's size to deliver a powerbomb like that to Lashley, that was pretty decent. And then he picks up the victory with the coup de grace. 1, 2, 3. Finn Bálor's the champion. And then we finally come to our main event. Now, by this point, the main event, it was just about to go midnight, so in terms of energy, we were quite knackered for this, but nonetheless, it's the main event of WrestleMania, the first time ever that a women's match is main eventing the show as well. We have Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte Flair versus Becky Lynch for both the Raw and Smackdown Women's Championships. It's winner takes all, and to start off, we have a little video package of Charlotte Flair arriving by helicopter, much like Ric Flair did at Clash of the Champions back in the day. And then, of course, Ronda Rousey comes out, played out by Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, The Bad Reputation. Very good stuff, but, you know, I was thinking in my head at the time, where is Shrek and Donkey for this? Missed opportunity there, but I digress again. Then you have Charlotte Flair coming out, you know, you know, very much, you know, extravagant. You know, she's got a nice fancy robe as well. And then Becky Lynch, you know, the underdog in this match, she comes out, you know, everyone's behind Becky for this. I distinctly remember there being a spot where Ronda's got both women in an armbar. She's basically hanging on the outside of the ring, like off the ring ropes while she's doing that. And then she gets hit with a drop kick, and then she lands quite dangerously to the outside. I thought she'd injured herself quite badly there. But then, of course, there's a point where she gets both women in an armbar, like, you know, in the ring, and it's just like, yeah, oh, that could have been close. And then I distinctly remember towards the end of the match, you know, they bring out a table, then Ronda's looking at it and she's like, you want tables? And she's like, tables are the bitches! And she pushes the table over. Very weird and very out of character for Ronda to do that. I mean, I guess, like, she was basically become a whiny heel at that point, but it was very silly to see. So then eventually it was like, you know, Charlotte's going to deliver a double spear to both Becky and Ronda through the table, but then using the momentum they throw Charlotte into the table and it doesn't break. I am the table! And yeah, and then we, you know, get the final little sequence between Ronda and Becky, you know, going back and forth, but then of course Ronda's about to go for the Piper's Pit. Becky manages to roll it into a crucifix pin, and then 1, 2, 3, and sure, yes, Ronda Rousey did botch the finish. Becky Lynch is the women's champion, both of Raw and SmackDown, and you know, as much as we were knackered by this point, you know, it was great that we finally got there. Becky Lynch is your Raw and SmackDown women's champions. And, you know, it was great to see her celebrate as such, and, you know, that it just capped off what had been a very long event by that point, but, you know, nonetheless, you know, it ended on a positive note, and, you know, we were all going to go home happy. Or so we thought, because after the event, for those of you who may not know, there were massive, like, you know, transport delays coming out of WrestleMania, out of MetLife Stadium, and me and thousands of other fans who attended WrestleMania were stuck, like, you know, waiting for a train. It was horrible, it was. Like, I mean, I'm not trying to say, like, you know, either party's at fault, whether it be WWE or New Jersey Transit. For 2 hours after the event finished, there were no trains running, and I guess my guesses are it was a communication error between the two parties. So, yeah, we're stuck there, and also it was raining as well, which was horrible, so waiting in the rain for a train, and it's just we're all just knackered at this point. We all just want to go. I didn't get back to my hostel in New York until about 3:30 in the morning, so you could probably tell I more or less slept most of the day, edited my WrestleMania vlog, and then eventually went over to Brooklyn for Raw that night. But apart from that, I was absolutely shattered. But all in all, apart from that little rant there, I did really enjoy WrestleMania. I guess, like, kind of like my takeaways from the event were, my pros and cons were, I really liked, you know, being there and the experience. There were a lot of really good feel-good moments throughout the event. You know, Seth Rollins winning the Universal Championship, Kofi Kingston winning the WWE Championship, Becky Lynch becoming Becky 2 belts, and there was a lot of fun stuff up and down the card, i.e. the Falls Count Anywhere match I thought was very fun to watch. But yeah, a lot of great feel-good moments on that side. But in terms of cons, so to play devil's advocate, I would say my biggest complaint with the event was the overall length. So, to put this into perspective, from the start of the kickoff show to the end of the main event, in total, clocked in around 7.5 hours. And for perspective, you can fly from London to New York in that time. And yeah, it did not need to be that long. So that's why I'm quite happy that, you know, now is the case where WrestleMania is now a 2-night event, so at least it's kind of more spaced out, and, you know, haven't got, like, you know, those late finishes, i.e. this WrestleMania in particular. But I felt like there were some matches that I felt were a bit underwhelming, particularly Kurt Angle versus Baron Corbin. I felt like Kurt Angle deserved to have a better match as a retirement match. Sure, he might have been, you know, hindered by his age, but nonetheless, he should have gone out on a better note, in my opinion. But all in all, I really enjoyed that WrestleMania, and, you know, looking back on it is, you know, it's like looking back on, like, events that happened in history. It is, well, it very much is history, now, if you think about it. So it's nice to go back and watch it, and, you know, kind of get all my, like, you know, re-jog my memories from the event, and it's got me excited for going to WrestleMania this year. So I did say earlier in the video that, you know, kind of what have I got planned for WrestleMania this year. So I get to Philadelphia on the 3rd of April. On the 4th of April, I kind of want to explore around the city and not do anything wrestling related, so that's my plan for that day. but I will be attending like a wrestling themed event later that evening. It's called Remix Rumble, so it's basically like a wrestling themed night out where you've got like, you know, the DJ playing wrestling themed music, and then like, you know, I think I was reading like there's going to be like, you know, wrestling themed drinks and cocktails and shots and all sorts. That'd be fun. And then on Friday I'm attending one day of WWE World, which is basically WrestleMania Access, and then later in the evening I'm going to Smackdown and the Hall of Fame at the Wells Fargo Center. Then the following day is of course the first day of WrestleMania itself at the Lincoln Financial Field, but before that you've got NXT Stand and Deliver also at the Wells Fargo Center, and then Sunday you've got WrestleMania Night 2. And then to end off the trip, I'll be going to Raw after WrestleMania on the Monday, also at the Wells Fargo Center. So all in all, should be a fun trip, and I'll definitely look forward to bringing you guys along for the ride with a few vlogs from that trip. But nonetheless, I'm excited. WrestleMania is going to be fun, and I will leave you on a positive note with some advice, and that is always to enjoy yourself, stay safe, and make the most of every opportunity that comes your way. Thank you for watching, and peace.